Hi everyone, this is Laurel from PVAS's Youth Education Team, and you are watching Nature Now. I'm going to show you today how you can plant a container garden. Now, container gardens are a really great way to grow food at your house without having to plant outside. So you can do a container garden indoors near a light source, or it can be something you put on your porch, or it can be something that you leave outside. So let's get started. I've already mixed up some soil in my little planter here. So you can see this is a mix of potting soil that was actually used last year in a little flower garden bed, but now it's got nothing growing in it. So I moved it to this container garden, and then I also added some extra soil that will help it keep its nutrients. So some new soil in there too. And I already mixed it all up, so I made sure that the two types of soil were combined together. You can also use a little bit of soil from your yard too. And I made sure they were mixed together, and I moistened the soil. That'll really help to get those roots started. So let me show you what we're going to be planting today. I've got a tomato seedling that I've already started. So this is an heirloom variety of tomato. And the one thing you want to keep in mind when you're planting tomatoes is look on your seed packet and see if you have what we call a determinate variety or an indeterminate variety. So a determinate variety would be best for this type of container because that's like a bush tomato. That means that all your tomatoes are going to be ready for harvest around the same time, and it's going to look like a bush instead of a long vine. An indeterminate variety of tomato would be a long vine that you would need to trellis up way up high. It could grow 10 feet tall. So that's not what we want. We want a determinate variety, which is what I have here. So I'm going to plant this. Now I have it in a little compostable pot here. So this actually, when it gets wet, it'll start to decompose and break down with the soil, and it will allow those roots to come right through here. And I also brought something else that's special for my tomato. I got some eggshells from my compost. So you can use eggshells to build up the calcium in your soil, and this is actually really great for tomatoes. It'll help them grow a little bit faster and stronger, so it's a great kind of natural fertilizer. Another thing that you could use is banana peels. So banana peels would add potassium to the soil and also nitrogen. So that would be a good natural fertilizer if you have that around as well. I'm going to start by digging a pretty deep hole in my soil here towards the back, and then I'm going to add my eggshells. So crunch them up. The smaller you get the pieces, the more available the calcium is going to be, so the quicker they can decompose in the soil. One more, and then I'll mix them around in the soil a little bit to make sure that they're incorporated in there. So here we go, mixing them in right around where I want to plant my tomato. So I'll dig that hole again, and I'm going to plant the pot with the tomato. So here's the pot, and now with tomatoes, they have these little tiny like hairs on their stem, and those hairs are actually the beginnings of roots, or at least they can be roots. So you can actually plant a tomato pretty deep, and it will grow a stronger root system. So it's okay if I plant this tomato almost up to these leaves. Some people, if you have a determinate variety, even will cut those leaves off and plant it even up a little higher. So I'm going to plant this pretty deep in the soil, and this will also give it some stability, like let it stand up tall. So here we go. All right, I'm pressing on the soil a little bit around the tomato, not too hard. And there's my tomato, planted already. Now I'm going to label my tomato. I have these homemade plant labels. I actually found these. I made them when I was a little kid, only about 7 years old or so. And I was digging through my gardening supplies looking for stuff for this year. And I found these. So they're really simple to make if you want to make something similar. It's just a piece of construction paper, and I did a little stamp to make it nice and pretty, and a colored popsicle stick. But you can make labels out of almost anything. If you are going to have your container outside and not sheltered, you might want to do like plastic or something that would not get wet in the weather. Okay, now I'm going to plant something else in my container garden. I have a few little onion starts here. And these I'm going to plant just a little bit into the soil so that their top is still visible on top of the soil and their root side is down. So I'll plant them a little bit away from each other so that they can grow nice and big. I think the instructions on the package said at least 3 to 4 inches away from each other. So one on this side, maybe one on this side. Really easy to plant. And then, let's see, one over here. Okay, my onions are all planted, and I'll label them later. And then now I've got some chives. So here I'm going to do them from seed. So they will take 10 to 15 days to germinate. All of this information is on the back of the packet. So if you just read the seed packet, you'll be an expert on how to plant these. So we're going to sow them in a sunny location after the danger of spring frost, or for earlier harvest, you can start them indoors too. I've actually already got some chives starting indoors too, so if these don't work out, then I can always transplant them. Chives are actually a great thing to plant in a container because chives will really take over your garden if you plant them outside with everything else. So chives will kind of blow their seeds in the wind and they can end up anywhere. So if you keep them in a container, that's a good place to keep them. Now it says to plant them 4 to 5 inches apart with the seeds. Obviously in this container we don't have a whole lot of room, so I'm going to plant them a little bit closer than that, and that might mean that I might harvest them a little bit earlier, and that's okay. So I'm not going to use the whole packet, but just a few seeds here, and I want to plant them 1/4 of an inch deep, so not very deep at all. Alright, there are my chives right over there. I'll go ahead and label them now. And the last thing that I'm going to plant in here is some lettuce. This is a leaf variety of lettuce, so that means you can harvest it by the leaf. And this is actually really great for a container garden because leaves can act as like a living mulch to help protect the soil from getting dried out in the hot sun. So if those leaves are on top, the soil won't dry out as much, and that's going to be great for our tomato plant. So they're a great companion plant for our tomato. Now these say that you want to sow them 1/4 of an inch down, just like the chives. So I'm going to do them in this whole front area here. Still giving my onion some room to grow though. And it'll get a little head start because it's already a little plant, so. I'm just sprinkling these. And again, we might be harvesting this before the plant's fully mature, or else it would kind of take over the whole container garden. And just gently spreading the soil over. So there is my container garden all planted. Now the last step, you want to make sure everything is watered in, especially that tomato, because its roots need to get into that new soil. Okay. Now that everything is all watered, we're just going to leave it out here in the sun and see what happens. Hopefully it'll grow me a nice garden. You could grow a pizza garden. You might call this a pizza garden. You could do, the chives and the onion and the tomato and maybe even some basil in here. That's another good companion plant for a tomato. If you have any container gardens that you've already planted, then you can post the pictures of them in our Facebook comments, and I would love to see your container gardens or your plans for a container garden. So check back next week for another Nature Now.